So just a quick overview, Reaction Commerce. We are an open source commerce platform for retailers and brands. We are GPL licensed, so we're freely available for anyone to access and, sorry, we're getting a little feedback. Freely available for anyone to download, modify, customize, and with Reaction Commerce, if you're joining the Reaction Action, you have a good sense of the capabilities, but there's kind of all the table stakes features and functionality you're going to need to operate an online storefront. Catalog management, inventory management, shipping, taxes, shopping cart, checkout. If you have any questions, there's lots of more information in our docs and in our Gitter chat room and in our forums in terms of how to get started using Reaction Commerce. So this is a photo of some of the team members. We are hiring, so we are a distributed first team. So even though we do have a presence here in Santa Monica, more than half the team is now distributed around the world. So if you're interested in joining the team, we've got lots of positions open. Check out our careers page. We'd love to start working with you more closely. And that's my dog, Grace, in that photo. I have to give a shout out to Grace. I mentioned a couple of these already. There's lots of ways you can get involved working with us. So on the developer side, we absolutely welcome contributions and pull requests. You can find out more information on GitHub and follow our GitHub issues and our GitHub boards. If you're an agency, you're working with clients and you'd love to work with us in a partnership type capacity, let us know. We've got you can fill out a form on our website and we'll be back in touch. There's chat, forums, and then our docs, which I already mentioned, should have a lot of information about getting started and how to customize Reaction Commerce to your needs. And I think that's it, other than t-shirts. So t-shirts, everyone who's interested, who's joining this can get a free t-shirt from us along with stickers and other fun gear. Just fill out that form that's in the chat room or you see on the screen right now. Give us your address, your t-shirt size, and we will ship that out to you. Did I forget anything, Tyson? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
All right.
Yeah.
We're going to jump over to Vishal and talk about an update on our performance. Vishal is joining us from Arizona this morning.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Well, good morning, everyone, or evening, wherever you guys are. So just as a high-level summary, so for the last 3 months, our team has been hyper-focused on 2 primary initiatives. The first one, which of course we're here to talk about, is the performance benchmarking under heavy load, both from having thousands and millions of SKUs and images on the storefront, and from having thousands of concurrent visitors simulating activities like hitting the PDP, applying coupon codes, and checking out. As a quick preview to Brent's presentation, we were initially seeing around 7 to 10 seconds as part of our load testing and load times, and we are now down to 4 seconds. Our goal is 3 seconds, which is something that that Brent has mentioned on his blog post, and again something that Brent will be diving deeper into. The second initiative, as a preview that we've been working on that I wanted to just kind of talk about a little bit, is that we've been working on search engine optimization enhancements to Reaction as well. There's a lot of things like sitemap generators. The robots file obviously is now going to be part of the equation as well, and some of the other critical search engine optimization methodologies that we're going to be implementing. More on that topic will be shared later, but essentially, I just wanted to kind of mention to everyone that we are really excited about working on initiatives that consider how consumers find your storefront on search engines, the time to load pages, and the potential performance hit under heavy load. These are all things that we're considering and working towards. That said, I will pass it on to Brent to take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Vishal. Let me share my screen so I have that ready. Let's see. 1 second. So everybody see that? So as Sarah mentioned, we put up a blog post I wrote late last week that talked about this, but I wanted to talk about it here a little bit. about the results of our load testing, how we approached it, what our load testing setup looks like, and what we plan to do that with that information in the future. Basically, our goal was to ensure that Reaction could run at scale, and if it can't, then to make it so that it could. Running at scale is one of those terms that means a lot of different things to different people, but for us, it came down to two main things. How many products, image, orders could you have in the database, and how many simultaneous users could use the site before seeing any performance degradation. Probably the common question that I see in Gear and the forums is, have you tested Reaction with millions of products? And so that we could test Reaction with millions of products, we needed to be able to populate the database with millions of products. So we built a tool that loads very large data sets, which we're calling the developer, the retailer, the mid-enterprise, and the enterprise, each one larger than the next. This is a command line tool that utilizes the Mongo bulk loading API and all the cores on your system so you can load these large data sets in minutes rather than hours or days. We started out focusing on the retailer data set, which is 210,000 products, over 1 million images, 2 million accounts, and 2 million orders. The other data sets just get larger from there, with the enterprise data set having over 52 million products and 1.5 trillion images. In the next few days, we'll be releasing this tool to open source that would allow you to load these data sets into your own installations. So how did this testing work out? So Reaction seems to be able to handle the product and tag data sets just fine, assuming the correct indexes are in place. We don't see big changes in latency when going from 1,000 to 10,000 to 210,000 products. On average, around 4 seconds, as Vishal mentioned, to load the home page, about 3.5 seconds for the tag and product detail pages. Accounts still need some work. Right now, if you log in as an admin, you'll have problems if you have a lot of accounts. Orders is pretty good, but still needs some work to probably not push as much data down to the client. So there's improvements there, but basically the consumer-facing part of the app holds up pretty well because we've really been looking at limiting what we're pushing down to the client, with a caveat that you will need a powerful enough DB configuration to handle it. So looking at the chart, we wanted to test how a Reaction behaved under load, which to us meant concurrent users, with 1,000 users being our first goal for the first. So how do you generate load with a Meteor app since the entire data layer happens in WebSockets? Well, we tried using JMeter tests driving a browser, which works, but we just could not get enough load generated because it just takes too much horsepower to run that many browsers. So we wrote this custom client in a library called Locust that allows us to run the load, generate a lot of load without using browsers. So this client behaves just like a Meteor client, subscribes to collections, executes methods, requests web pages, but doesn't use a browser, allowing us to run many of them on one machine. We portion off the traffic so that 4% of the users place orders, 25% add to cart and abandon, 25% go to a tag page, and 46% just visit the homepage and leave. 4% may not seem like a lot, but with 1,000 concurrent users, that means you have at least 40 virtual users placing an order at all times. So back to this chart here. So we have a cluster. We built a cluster. We built a cluster that's just specifically for just load generation. We built a custom Docker image that generates 100 users per instance of the Docker image. So we can basically scale up our load by just adding more instances. We can just say 10, 15, 20 tasks, and that will give us 1,000, 2,000 users all running concurrently. To get our actual stats, we're running a separate cluster here that's running Taurus, which runs JMeter tests, which we call the samplers. These are actually running real browsers, a headless Chrome that goes in and visits the home page, visits the tag page, takes the JavaScript and everything else we get back, renders that, and says, okay, when is the page actually loaded? So the numbers we're talking about are not just when does the server dump its data, but when is the app actually usable. We did this the same way. We're also using a custom Docker image that Grieg has built for us, our new DevOps person who's built for us, that allows us to also to scale up these sampling machines. So you can see that both these clusters run outside the main hosting cluster, so that this does not interfere in any way with our data with the actual hosting. Inside our main hosting cluster, we're running an ECS cluster, which uses a customized version of Reaction in a Docker container that's been instrumented to report to Qadira, uses a CDN for the initial package load, and runs a custom health check. Not shown in this hosting chart is our custom version of Qadira that monitors how the servers are operating. If you're not familiar with Qadira, it's similar to tools like New Relic, but designed specifically for Meteor. We've slightly modified it to work with our hosting setup and have been using it to spot bottlenecks. You can see it running here where there's not currently any load, but you can see on methods, I'm drilling down into methods and looking at the response times, and I can drill into individual response. If I see like, oh, this one looks like it's a little slow, what exactly is happening? I can then even drill further down and see exactly what took what. A find, a fetch that took 4 milliseconds, 262 milliseconds, 2 milliseconds. So as you can imagine, that works really well for drilling down and figuring out if something takes 3 seconds to run, what happened there. So I've been using this to open up some issues in the main Reaction repo of things that need to be optimized or improved. And we've already made a lot of those changes. A lot of them being just adding new indexes. The Qadira is an open source project. It's not our project, but it's an open source project. And our tweak of Qadira and our custom Docker Compose image is all open source and available. In the chart here, you can see backing up all of this is Atlas, which is the hosted Mongo environment provided by Mongo itself. Here for our retailer dataset testing, we've been running an M50 instance, which is an 8 CPU, 32 gigs of RAM, and 160 gigs of storage. The stats are then accumulated into CSV so we can analyze them later. But just by watching logs here, you can see, well, you can't see it right in a second, but you can see it reporting. You can see it reporting the data. So using these tools, we've been able to do two things: measure what progress we've made so far and how much further we have to go. Right now, as I published in the blog post, we see around a 4-second load time for the home page and about 3.5 seconds for the product detail page and the tag page. While these numbers are not at our goal, I wanted to mention some progress that we've made here. This pretty much stayed consistent even as we increased the load. The main thing that was taxed was the database server. As recently as 3 to 4 months ago, loading more than a few hundred products would cause the grid to be non-functioning. We've now switched to the consumer-facing grid to use the new catalog collection, which is a denormalized version of products that now loads quickly, even with large data sets. We've also removed our revision control system in favor of this simpler publication system, which still allows you to stage new products or changes without adding a lot of complexity to the code. Another thing we did on the front end was lazy load certain larger libraries such as transliteration and moment and load them only when necessary. So we've done a lot of things, each one of them sort of incremental improvements put together. They've definitely made an impact that we can now measure and see. So this has got us down to 4 seconds, which is still too long, but it's better than the 7 to 10 seconds, the white screen of death, as it was being called for a while, that we were seeing. As most anybody who does web marketing will tell you, every second counts. So we will be watching these numbers carefully and trying to get them lower. Shortly after finishing this initial push, this sort of proof of concept, we plan to incorporate load testing into our PR release process so we can track what progress we are making and provide customers and developers stats with each new release on how we are doing and make sure that we're not going backwards. Also important. So hopefully, I expect to see that on a release, we'll just publish these stats. This release, we're seeing a, you know, we went from a 4.0 to a 3.7 load time. So that's where we are with performance from the customer side. We still got some ways to go. So you may have noticed that I haven't really talked about developer performance yet. Well, the story here is still a bit more complicated, but getting better all the time. And this next release, which will be release 1.14, we will be removing all but core plugins, enough to test the app and evaluate, but without loading up installations with a lot of code that they may never use. This code will still be available in our Reaction Contributor organization. For those plugins, we're hoping to see more community involvement and ownership. If you or your organization is interested in maintaining any of those plugins, please contact me. I can talk to you about how or what the process for that would be. So we expect that removing these hundreds and hundreds of lines of code, along with the improvements in Meteor 1.7, you should see a significant improvement in build time. Whether it still is definitely not where we would like it to be, it's getting better all the time. And if you started working with the new GraphQL storefront, restarts, and that will give you a much better development experience. Restarts there are nearly instantaneous, and the storefront gets closer and closer to being completed all the time. So that's my state of the performance for now. You can stay up to date with the releases, and every release should have a performance component. If you have questions about load testing or performance in general, you're welcome them here, or you can contact me online via Gitter. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Brent and Vishal. And kudos. I know you've been working real hard over the last few months on getting all the performance and load testing infrastructure in place. So big thumbs up. And as Brent said, and as Vishal said, this is just the beginning. We wanted to get the foundation in place so that we could actually start testing. The team here is tired of hearing me say, but you can't manage what you can't measure. And we're now in a place where we can measure, and we're going to be doing more and more of that. We're going to be publishing all that data. So this is really just the start. And then we want to actually enable you all to do testing as well. So we're excited to be at this part, and then improve from here. So you might have answered this, Brent. We're having some audio issues, but there is a question that came in from Philip. What's the first paint time on the homepage? Assuming it's 4 seconds is the full page load time. Maybe talk a little bit about the answer to that, but also kind of we have the different personas that we're testing against. Or Vishal, you can take that, whoever.
Brent, maybe you can touch on the first paint. Yeah,
so I don't know if it's first paint. What we're using, so we're using JMeteor, which is using WebDriver. So basically what we're looking for is when is the DOM element visible, which basically means when is the page ready to be interacted with. So that's actually a little after first paint. And that's the 4 second number that we were looking at. Obviously that's the big number, right? Like, obviously you don't get anywhere if your homepage doesn't load quickly. That's 4 seconds. We'd like to get it down to 3 seconds. That's the number that Vishal and I decided that's sort of like an industry standard. So we still got some work there, but I would say the 4 second number is pretty solid. I haven't seen the homepage really vary when all the work we've done too much from that number.
Thanks, Brent. And then to answer the other question, as far as persona goes, there's two aspects to it, right? One is the consumer, and then there's the admin or the operator. Brent touched a little bit with regards to how we're working more towards the operator experience as a secondary thing, but primarily we are focused on the consumer user experience and simulating those visitors. So persona-wise, when it comes to the consumers, I wouldn't say there's personas more than what we have identified as simulated visitors doing certain activities. So essentially, what we're going to be working on or have worked on and are continuing to work on is 70% of the shoppers will add items to the cart but abandon them because we want to simulate all these different things that are happening on the storefront. 96% of shoppers visited the storefront but did not purchase any products at all. So those could include abandoned carts or not. And then the 4%, which we're presuming is an average conversion rate, 4% who did purchase products, of those, A fourth will check out as guests without signing in. A fourth signed into the storefront with existing accounts. A fourth signed into the storefront with existing accounts and used a promo code. And a fourth created new accounts and signed in. So these are all the different types of use case scenarios and percentages that we're working on and have implemented as part of our scripts to simulate these visitors. Hope that answers the question to some extent.
So Philip has a follow-up question around our approach to, maybe you can take this one, Tyson, to server-side caching of our GraphQL queries. He finds that it's a pain point, especially if our API is public, because we can't just force everyone to use persisted queries. So what's our thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So far, we've really been working on porting the functionality and exposing the functionality of reaction through GraphQL. And we haven't yet focused much effort on server-side caching or caching in general in GraphQL. But with the work that Vishal and Brent have been doing, that load testing, I think, has been happening on the Meteor side of things. So as we get the functionality exposed through GraphQL, we will then implement the load testing that Brent and Vishal and their team have been working on to
the GraphQL side,
performance of the GraphQL side. And then at that point, we will introduce caching and tackle those problems.
Yep, makes sense. So I'm going to jump over to some of the other questions that are coming up in the chat. Just keep asking questions and we'll get as many as we can. So the Mo from London asked, are there any, is Reaction Serverless compatible out of the box?
That also is a good question.
We love that one, yeah.
So that is a great question. In terms of runtime, we are compatible. There are several runtimes supported in, let's say, AWS Lambda. Reaction is JavaScript, and you could run them, but I would say that at this point, we're probably not compatible, only because Meteor requires some long-lived WebSocket connections, which you might say is not really in line with the serverless model of short-lived connections. That's not to say that it couldn't be done, and if anyone in the community wants to experiment with this, that would be great. We would love to hear about any work that is being done there. And in the future, some requests might be more, we may be able to make some requests serverless ready, but at the moment, I would say that it's just very experimental, and let us know if you get it working. Yep.
So we got a question back on the performance and load testing around, can you make any recommendations or kind of suggestions around size, capacity, based on the results so far? So these are our personas for production deployment with databases. Absolutely. So we would welcome feedback, recommendations, suggestions, your thoughts. You can do that through any of our channels. There's lots more detail in the blog post, which is in the chat, in the Zoom chat right now. So there's comments there. But sure, we would welcome recommendations, suggestions, especially from your real world usage of Reaction, kind of your use case, your catalog size, kind of your what you're trying to solve for.
We haven't really
plans to have a storefront built on Gatsby. So we'll back up a second. We're currently, as a lot of you know, building a storefront prototype using Next.js, Material UI. That's available in our repo, and that's in active Development. And that's where we're building on top of the GraphQL storefront layer. We have investigated Gatsby. We love Gatsby. We don't have immediate plans, but it is something I know that's quite popular. Would love to see a Gatsby storefront prototype. So whether that's us or the community, to be determined. But it is something we have looked at internally. And if we don't get to it, someone I'm sure will in the near future. And we think that's probably going to be the next storefront prototype that we start to look at.
Yeah, good answer, Sarah. This is sort of related. Michael asked the question, have you heard of Frontastic? Are there any plans to add connectors for external fronting? And I think the answer here is very similar to the Gatsby answer, and that we're implementing GraphQL. This is an open API available to the to any front end. So if you have a custom front end, you may, and I'm not familiar with Frontastic, but if you have a custom front end, then you may need to write an adapter to translate the data, but that should be very possible to have a custom front end.
Yeah, so you can have, there's nothing stopping you now, and we do get to hear the feedback that Tyson's got some mic challenges, so sorry about that. So yeah, you can absolutely use whichever front end framework, or whether it's Gatsby or Next or Frontastic, which I had not heard of, that you want. We are in progress with our GraphQL storefront API. We are targeting our 2.0 release for, let's say, towards the end of August. So we're probably about a month or so out from releasing that officially out in the wild, but it is in active development. You can follow along, certainly on GitHub. Lots of pieces and components have already been put in place, and we're just finishing up over the next, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks. Yep. So Lone had it wasn't a question, but just a confirmation that the Meteor 1.7 release, which was the new kind of separated bundles for the modern and legacy browsers, he's reporting that that's a game changer for reaction and performance. So there's lots of kind of moving parts here, as you can imagine, whether it's the changes that Meteor is making, as well as the changes that we're making with the GraphQL layer, and then our own performance testing, which is giving some significant improvements, especially with the 1.13 release. And then, as Brent mentioned, our 1.14 release, which is next up, will also have some benefits in terms of performance, both for the developer experience as well as the operator experience.
Yeah, Sarah, I think that catches us up on questions here. Great. So if you have any other questions out there, put them into the chat, and we will get them.
Yep. Brent or Vishal, anything else you wanted to add? Not to put you on the spot, but that's what's the fun of live streaming. Anything else to add in terms of kind of next steps on the performance and load testing, like a kind of near term, kind of where we're going to go from here?
Well, I think one of the things that was mentioned was that right now we're just running whatever hosting configuration we can to get results. But I think one of the next steps we're going to look at is optimizing the platform and being able to tell people, for this particular set of data, these different personas that Vishal has created, you can run this server with this configuration, and it should cost you X dollars, roughly X dollars a month. We have not been optimizing hardware spend right now, but that'll probably be the next thing we do. Is like, well, how little hardware can we run these configurations on and get away with it and still be performant? Because obviously that's going to be something that people are looking at. So that's one of the things we haven't done yet, but it is definitely on our radar, is to give people the different ways they can run this. We've been running everything in AWS. So for now, we'll be able to give them some numbers, I think in just the next week or so on that.
And then, just to piggyback off of that, I mean, along with that, we also haven't done too much in terms of cost optimization by using reserved instances or spot instances or anything like that within AWS environments, right? So that's another thing that we'll try to kind of be a little bit more mindful of and try to give some of those data points to the community in terms of, hey, here's another way that you can save on the cost, because really right now we're just spinning things up. I don't want to say on the fly, but we're spinning things up as we need them, and using that more of a priority in terms of getting things up and running in order to do our load testing, as opposed to looking at the different methods. And there's so many different metrics and methods that you can leverage on AWS to save cost, right? So we'll kind of publish some of those data points as we dig deeper into those.
And just the big next step is just trying to get all these load testing stuff built into the Circle CI and built as part of our our test and deployment process. So hopefully every PR, or at least every release, but hopefully every PR can be tested to make sure that we're on top of any performance regressions as soon as they happen, and then we have some real world data on which because performance optimization is always just a lot of guessing and then testing. So to be able to really see what the results are.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So on that note, just in the interest of being transparent, one of the reasons why over the last, I want to say like 3 to 4 weeks, why things took us a little more time than we had expected was because of the last release did have some breaking changes and also changes in the database schema, and that actually impacted some of the scripts that we had already written and the load generator tool that one of our team members, Akashit, had already written as well, right? So those are the things that we're being more mindful of in terms of moving forward. If there are database schema changes and or other breaking changes, then as Brent said, having that part of the QA process will significantly help us moving forward on multiple fronts. So
great. I think we're out of all the questions, and we've covered some of all the kind of topics we wanted to cover around performance and load testing. Again, just reach out to us via any of our channels, Gitter, our blog, or our forums if you have feedback or suggestions. This is definitely a work in progress, and we'll be sharing more updates as we go in the coming weeks and months. There is a recording of this for the folks that missed the first part. It will be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll post that out through all of our kind of social channels as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you at our next reaction action in a couple months. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Brent. Thanks, Vishal.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.